Why you wouldn't survive the burning of Washington, 1814. It was late August of 1814, and Washington City was not a capital built for war. The roads were dusty and uneven. Many buildings stood isolated in open ground, and large sections of the city remained unfinished. The United States itself was young, barely 30 years removed from independence. Its institutions were still developing, its military still inexperienced, and its confidence still fragile beneath the surface. The War of 1812 had already stretched into its third year, but for many residents the fighting felt distant, confined to the Canadian border or to naval battles along the Atlantic coast. Few truly believed that the British Empire would strike directly at the political heart of the Republic. That belief would collapse within a single day. Earlier in 1814, the global balance of power shifted dramatically when Napoleon Bonaparte was forced into abdication. For years, Britain had been consumed by total war in Europe. Now, thousands of seasoned troops were suddenly available for deployment elsewhere. The British government approved a strategy designed not only to pressure American forces militarily, but to deliver a symbolic blow. A fleet under Admiral George Cockburn sailed into the Chesapeake Bay, carrying veteran soldiers commanded by Major General Robert Ross. These were not inexperienced recruits. They were disciplined regulars who had marched across Europe against one of the most formidable armies in history. In August, British forces landed in Maryland and began moving inland. Intelligence in Washington was inconsistent and slow. There was no telegraph, no instant verification. Reports of enemy movements traveled by horseback, mixed with rumor and speculation. President James Madison, determined not to appear passive, rode out personally to review defensive preparations. Militia units from surrounding states were assembled quickly, but coordination between commanders was poor. Many of the men had little combat experience, and the chain of command was confused. On August 24, 1814, American forces attempted to halt the British advance at the Battle of Bladensburg. The defensive line was poorly positioned and inadequately reinforced. When British troops advanced under artillery support, including Congreve rockets, whose noise and unpredictable trajectory unsettled inexperienced soldiers, American resistance faltered. Units broke formation. Orders failed to circulate clearly. The collapse came swiftly and publicly. What was intended as a stand to defend the capital became a disorderly retreat, later mocked as the Bladensburg races. President Madison himself was forced to withdraw to avoid capture. With the road to Washington open, panic spread through the capital. Government officials gathered documents and fled. Dolly Madison oversaw the removal of important state papers and the famous full-length portrait of George Washington from the president's house before evacuating. Civilians faced a stark decision: leave immediately or remain and hope the British would limit their actions. Washington had no serious fortifications. It had been designed as a political center, not a defensive stronghold. That evening, British forces entered the city with minimal resistance. They moved deliberately toward government buildings. The destruction that followed was not random chaos, but calculated retaliation. The previous year, American troops had burned public buildings in York, Upper Canada. British commanders now intended to respond in kind. The United States Capitol was set on fire first. Flames consumed the House and Senate chambers, destroying libraries, furnishings, and official records. The structure that symbolized representative government burned through the night. Soon after, British troops reached the president's house. After allowing soldiers to eat food prepared for an anticipated American dinner, they set the building ablaze. The fire gutted the interior. The Treasury and War Department buildings were also destroyed. Smoke rose above the city, visible for miles. For residents who remained, the experience would have been overwhelming. Fire in a city constructed largely of wood posed unpredictable danger. There were no modern firefighting systems capable of controlling multiple large-scale blazes. Wind carried embers across rooftops. Families sheltered indoors, uncertain whether their homes would ignite next. Though British forces largely targeted public property, fear of looting and violence persisted. The psychological shock was profound. The national government had fled. The military had collapsed in open battle. The symbols of sovereignty were burning. Internationally, the message was unmistakable. The young republic could be penetrated. Domestically, morale faltered. If the capital could fall so easily, what did that imply about the durability of the nation itself? The invasion lasted roughly 26 hours, but its impact far exceeded its duration. Then nature intensified the chaos. A violent storm swept through Washington the following day. Heavy rain and powerful winds extinguished several fires, but also caused additional destruction. Some contemporary accounts describe a tornado forming near Capitol Hill, tearing through structures and lifting cannons. The storm reportedly caused casualties among British troops as well as civilians. The convergence of military defeat, urban fire, and extreme weather created an atmosphere of catastrophe that few residents could have psychologically endured without lasting impact. When British forces withdrew, their objective had been accomplished. They had humiliated the United States government and demonstrated imperial reach. Yet they did not remain to occupy the city permanently. Washington stood scarred, partially in ruins, and politically shaken. Reconstruction began, though slowly and amid uncertainty. Congress debated whether the capital should even remain in Washington or be relocated. Ultimately, the decision was made to rebuild. The president's house was restored and repainted, its white exterior becoming iconic. The Capitol was reconstructed and later expanded, emerging in the decades that followed as a far grander structure than the one that burned in 1814. The war itself continued until the Treaty of Ghent was signed in December of that year. In hindsight, the burning of Washington did not destroy the Republic. Instead, it became a lesson in vulnerability and resilience. But hindsight did not exist for those who lived through it. If you had stood in Washington on August 24, 1814, you would not have known that recovery was possible. You would have seen disciplined enemy soldiers marching through the seat of your government. You would have watched legislative halls consumed by flame. You would have understood that the president had fled and that organized defense had collapsed in hours. Survival would not merely have required avoiding physical harm. It would have demanded enduring the collapse of certainty, the fear of occupation, the loss of livelihood, and the humiliation of national defeat. The burning of Washington remains the only time a foreign power successfully captured and set fire to the United States Capitol. Its significance lies not only in charred walls, but in the exposure of fragility. Young nations often believe themselves secure until reality intervenes. In August 1814, beneath a sky darkened first by smoke and then by storm clouds, Washington learned that lesson. And if you had been there, survival would have felt neither guaranteed nor heroic. It would have felt precarious, defined by confusion, fear, and the unsettling realization that even a capital city can fall.